end of her parting.
Get him here.
He liked excitement.
Take us somewhere.
He wanted her. Their passion upset the balance of power.
What's all this top secret business I've been hearing about?
The soul of Detroit.
You know I work for Drew.
Then that makes two of us.
This one can do things for me like no other woman I've ever met.
Behind the
Podcast.
Try and understand.
the power.
The important thing is to avoid an investigation before it ever gets to you.
You haven't told me everything.
Who's running this thing at the Pentagon?
The new boy, Fellhauer.
So he can take the fall in case anything goes wrong.
You asked interrogative questions around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing?
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now,
Hey kids, it's your old pal ML Elric, back with the Soul of Detroit, and today we're joined by one of my old pals, Craig Timberg, a reporter who I worked with many years ago at the Concord Monitor. Today I'm destitute, unemployed, and spending my Tuesdays in a basement, and Craig is now working, and has been for some time, at the Washington Post, where he has had the, I don't want to say unenviable until you read how much work he went through, but so I'll just say the assignment of trying to help verify whether or not the laptop left at a Washington area computer store was indeed Hunter Biden's laptop, and whether some of the information contained on that laptop is indeed the real thing. Craig has got to bounce by 12:30, so we're going to be very judicious with his time. And Craig, we appreciate you dialing in from D.C.
That's my pleasure. Good to see you.
So before we get to Craig, I just want to let you know that Marc is feeling unwell, so hopefully he makes it till 12:30. And Shawn is here as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as ever, back from the road. And we're all here thanks to our generous sponsors, Luke Nowacki, Hall Financial, and the Caju Cafe. Real quickly, we want to tell you a little bit about Hall Financial because they are offering quite a deal for folks who are looking to make a good deal to purchase or refinance their home. Marc, what's this week's enticement from the good people at Hall Financial?
Well, just a great deal, first off, and good customer service. And you can sign up for a free 5-minute mortgage review right now. And they're having a contest where you can win tickets to the Tigers game. You can win Drew's tickets.
These are to the Champions Club.
The Champions Club, yes.
And I think you get to go with Mazaway, right?
Unfortunately, yeah. But Hall Financial, they can help you tap into your home equity, unlock tens of thousands of dollars. We all know where rates are today because we talk about it all the time. So call 866-CALL-HALL right now. You can register for that, get a 5-minute mortgage review, or you can visit them online at callhall.com.
And Luke Nowacki is the guy who helps you plan for your future. We're going to tell you a little bit more about Luke when Craig bounces. But suffice to say, if you are trying to plan for your retirement, Luke Nowacki at Pinnacle Wealth Strategies is worth a call. More on how to get a hold of Luke in just a minute. But first, let's get to Craig because he is a man in demand. Craig, how many months did you guys spend with this information? And I guess we should probably let people know that you didn't actually have the laptop itself. You had, I'm assuming, some sort of portable drive where all the information was dumped on. How did you guys get your hands on this?
Yeah, this is a complicated story. You probably know that the New York Post published stories about 3 weeks out from the 2020 election, in which they said they had a copy of the data from Hunter Biden's laptop that he'd left at a computer repair shop, and they found all sorts of interesting things that they reported on. At that time, my colleagues at the Post tried to get a copy of that data. We got in touch with Rudy Giuliani, who, of course, is President Trump's lawyer. We got in touch with Steve Bannon, who was the president's strategist, and said, can we see the data? We want to vet it. And they wouldn't give us anything at that time. So we were, it was right before the election, so it isn't like we had nothing else to do, but we were kind of a little bit left out in the cold. And then last summer in June, another conservative activist who used to work for Steve Bannon came to us and said, I have the copy of the data. Would you like to see it? And so we said, yeah, we'd like to see it. And we did. We got a portable drive that was supposedly a copy of the original data from the laptop. But, we were, as you might expect, skeptical and careful. We wanted to make sure that we that we knew what we had and what we didn't have. And so a colleague of mine spent months and months going through everything on that drive, all 217 gigabytes of it. And then because I'm a technology reporter, they came to me a few months later and said, we have all this stuff. We have emails, we have iMessage chats, we have pictures. But what we don't know is if any of it's real or it could have been planted by the Russians or somebody else. And so I came into the story kind of late, I'd say probably in December. And my role in this was to try to figure out if there's a way to verify any of it. So I got in touch with sources of mine in the kind of computer security world and started asking, like I said, imagine the Washington Post had come into possession of data from a laptop computer that we think might be newsworthy. What can we do? And the answer was, from the first several people I talked to, was essentially nothing, right? If you don't have the original computer, you don't have a chain of custody, things in the digital world can be faked. But after a few more calls, a guy who's a security researcher at Johns Hopkins, a guy named Matt Green, who I've known for nearly a decade now, he said, well, it would be hard, but if there's email on it and it's from Gmail, there's a chance that we can verify that. And that sort of started the odyssey that ate up several months of my professional life.
So let me talk a little bit about why we have Craig on now, because we've heard so much about why did the mainstream media take so long to weigh in on this. And I would argue that the New York Post probably is the mainstream media, although they come from a particular point on the political spectrum. But when you get something like this, it's both a reporter's dream and nightmare to have somebody drop a tranche of really valuable information on you. But the nightmare part is this legit? And we already know what the Russians were doing to try and affect the elections in 2016 and beyond. We already know about spoofing and all these other things that are going out there, deep fakes. So, and the Washington Post on many occasions, in fact, one of the greatest things I've ever seen is somebody tried to set them up on some information on the Alabama Senate race, and the Washington Post exposed the person who was trying to set them up. So the Washington Post has been both given information that may be erroneous and been plotted against to try and get them to publish information that was erroneous so that it could then be turned around to say, look, the Washington Post does indeed publish fake news. And I'll give you a very brief example from what we've seen here. I think people may not know, although we've talked about it in the past, when Jim Schaefer and I got Kwame Kilpatrick's text messages at the Free Press, we spent several months verifying them, even though we had no doubt that they were legitimate. But we used things such as the mayor's private calendar, the mayor's city credit card records, and other public records to verify that the things being discussed about in those text messages actually happened when they did happen before we published our story. When you're talking about what we had, it was a much smaller pile of information than what the Washington Post had. And we know where we got it, and we had no question about its provenance. The Washington Post had this information that had been through so many hands, including those of Rudy Giuliani, who thinks that the election was stolen and is still waiting for the Kraken to appear. So this is a booby trap, the likes of which few media organizations have encountered. And Craig is the guy brought in at the last minute to say, hey, Craig, please make sure that we don't get fooled on this. I mean, that's a pretty daunting assignment. How did you feel when they came to you?
Yeah, I think you've put it well. It is right. We live to find out information. There's a lot of information on that laptop. We didn't know what, if any of it, we could trust. And that is a very awkward spot to be in. And we were really happy to kind of get through this process, as difficult as it was, because what we found is that basically 99% of everything on that laptop, we can't vouch for. It might be true, it might not be true. We just don't know. But it was nice to find that there was some information there that was verifiable. And, we had this guy at Johns Hopkins, Matt Green, who was able to, when you send an email it comes with what's called a cryptographic signature. And so that verifies that I am who I say I am. And it also verifies that the email wasn't altered after it was sent. So that's a very useful thing. This is a technology that was essentially created to protect you against spam. So when you got your various, commercial pitches, you knew who it was from. But Matt was only able to verify, I guess, 1,800 of the emails we had out of 129,000. But he said, there's technical things here that I can't solve, and you might want to try to hire someone else who can get farther. And that's what we did next. We found a guy, another source of mine, a guy named Jake Williams, who used to be a hacker for the National Security Agency and does forensic work for a living. And he looked at it and he said, yeah, I think I can do some things that might get us farther. And he did, and he was able to verify 23,000 out of the 129,000 emails. That doesn't solve the problem with all of these other documents, the videos, the iMessages. He wasn't able to get those verified. But getting 23,000 emails was, I think we saw it as a real victory. And I think we also felt as though we had done everything we reasonably could do with a very difficult set of data. And, as Mike pointed out, at the Washington Post, we spend a lot of time making sure that everything we publish is true. And when we make mistakes, as we do, inevitably we correct them. And so, but the thing we dislike most is getting stuff wrong. And so, when you have something that's been handled as many times as this data was, where you have reason to be suspicious that it was maybe mishandled, you kind of can't be too careful.
What were the suspicions about it being mishandled? Like, why do you think they might have been mishandled?
Well, you start with the fact that there's this kind of crazy story at the beginning of it. Here, Hunter Biden, the president's son, supposedly leaves a laptop full of, at a minimum, embarrassing information at a repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware, and never goes back to get it. And then somehow it ends up in the hands of Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, who soon is a chief advisor for the person who Hunter Biden's father is running against for the U.S. presidency. So, the initial story, I think, it definitely made people wonder. And then, of course, there were immediately claims that, well, this is the latest Russian hack and dump campaign. It was manipulated. We're in no position to do that. The hackers who work for major governments around the world, including ours, are extremely good at what they do, and they're much better than we are as journalists at spotting things. And then there's the particulars of the data. So if we had actually gotten Hunter Biden's laptop computer, which now is in the possession of the FBI and has been for more than 2 years now, that's a completely different thing than getting a portable hard drive that's been copied 2 or 3 or 4 times along the way. And what our forensic people found is that everyone who opened that data altered it in some way. We have Wi-Fi links from the repair shop. We have Bluetooth links from when it was copied. We have files that were added later. There's a file that says salacious pics package, right? So they had pulled together, the photographs that they thought were embarrassing and pulled them in one place. But every time that happens, you have to be a little bit suspicious about the motives of the people who are handling it and what they could do technically that you wouldn't be able to detect. And then finally, when it came time to try to verify the data more generally, there are a bunch of core directories in the data that were simply missing. And this doesn't mean that anything nefarious was done, but when you copy something again and again, every time you can make a copy, the data changes a little bit. And so of the kinds of directories that the forensic guys would have used to sort of check things against other directories, about half of them are gone. And so that also, causes you concern.
Well, I kind of feel like we're maybe bearing the lead. What was the big thing you guys found in the verifiable emails from Hunter Biden's laptop that might be concern?
The newsiest thing we found, and this was our main story that we did in the Post about this, had to do with a deal that Hunter Biden got into with a Chinese energy company for which he was paid almost $5 million. And the deal almost immediately went upside down. And, this was not a new discovery, and that had been reported here and there. But we found a lot of evidence that the basic parameters of this were true, that he did get that money, that the deal kind of didn't go anywhere. And so we wrote a very long investigative piece that relied in part on the emails, but also relied on a lot of other reporting, including emails we got, from the Swedish government and bank documents we got from sources. So, but we didn't find anything really new and explosive in the 23,000 emails we were able to verify. A lot of them are just like Google alerts or Politico. Politico will alert a story, it goes automatically. We have a lot of those. We have a lot of, Wells Fargo banking alerts. We have things from Hunter Biden's daughter's schools and sports teams. So for all of that work, the journalistic revelations were not all that profound, frankly.
Well, one thing that you were able to verify, and I can't remember whether it was through your forensic experts or through some of the supplemental reporting you did where you got other information, other sources, and were able to verify this independently, was an email between someone from Burisma, the Ukrainian company that was at the center of these impeachment hearings, and Hunter Biden, thanking Hunter Biden for setting up a meeting with Hunter and Joe Biden and saying, hey, let's get a coffee before I go to the airport. This is significant, not so much in my mind because it proves that there was something fishy going on, but it's significant because both Hunter Biden and Joe Biden denied that meeting happened. And I think, if I recall correctly, the White House, when you asked them about this, saying, hey, it looks like maybe this did happen, they basically referred you to their earlier statement. And you guys were able to lock down to the satisfaction of not just Rupert Murdoch, but more reasonable people that maybe Joe Biden did meet with someone from Burisma with his son, which one can presume furthered the ambitions of Burisma and Hunter Biden. That feels to me like maybe not a smoking gun, but you caught somebody in a lie, and that's the sort of thing that can give rise to other questions.
Yeah. I mean, you make a couple of logical steps there that we can't really verify, like if we were able to determine where and when, et cetera. But there is that email, and it does exist in the verified batch. So I think it's reasonable to draw whatever conclusions you want to from that. I mean, the Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma, right? So it's not as though that's exactly a new thing, but that email does appear to be legit.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess just to frame it properly from my perspective, it looks like you caught somebody in a lie. And as reporters, when people lie to us, we wonder what they're lying about, why they're lying about, and what else they might be lying about. So it's possible that this reporting may have created a fissure that may open at a later date. And I suspect if the Republicans get control of Congress, this email will be front and center in a new impeachment hearing, perhaps, but we'll see what happens after November. But I know one of the things Shawn is dying to ask is what was in the salacious pictures folder?
Yeah, and were you able to verify the pictures?
Were they truly salacious?
So I was on the technical forensic ends of it. The person who went through everything was my colleague, Matt Visor, who is one of our White House reporters. So, and I don't think we are going to describe pictures that we can't verify. We just don't know. So those pictures might be real. They may not be real, but there are other news organizations who felt like it was okay to publish those. And I think you could probably find them online.
Well,
good answer.
To draw another parallel with the Kilpatrick investigation, when we looked at text messages, we tried to group them as well, and we just had paper, so it was easier to put things in different folders. But initially, we had some messages that we considered to be romantic. And then we had some where we had to create a hardcore file, and we had to break them down. Those were judgments we made based on the material in front of us that other people may look at and say, that's not that bad. I just wonder, when you see things that say salacious pics, did you ever get a sense that was someone who was looking to make hay out of this, who said, oh, yeah, these are salacious, but to more objectivize, it might just be, I don't know, a guy in his bathing suit that doesn't really seem salacious to me.
I mean, this is going to be disappointing, but I never went through the salacious pics files. I don't actually know what's in there. My presumption has been that that folder was made by someone who was looking to distribute that information. But I don't know the exact relationship between the data in that file and the stuff that ended up, online in other publications. It was not my part of the reporting, I'm afraid.
Okay. And did you or the team have a sense after looking at all this? And when we talk about, I think it was 219,000, that was 219,000 emails. There was other information.
129,000.
Oh, sorry, 129,000. Okay. So more than 10% of it was verified, but there's other information on that computer. Did the team who looked at this come away thinking, wow, there's some amazing things here, but we just can't verify them, so we're just going to have to leave that on the table? Or perhaps you're still working to verify some of those things?
I mean, I think that we are still working on some reporting related to this. I'm sorry to be this way, but I don't think it's I don't think it's really right for me to characterize like what other reporters thought about it. It's
you don't want to end up on Fox
There's a lot of stuff in there, and some of it has found its way online in other ways. But we were very careful not to kind of describe things we can't vouch for, if that makes sense. Because once the Washington Post says, "Oh, and by the way, there are these 50 other things, and let us tell you about them, and then let's tell them why we don't know if they're true or not," we've put our stamp on it, and that's something we were careful to avoid doing.
When you're verifying these emails and the other contents on the computer, because you said Gmail and, it was an Apple computer, as Google or Apple, do they help out at all? Because I know Apple, their big thing is all about privacy. Do they help verify it, or would they help verify it? Do you even bother going to them?
No, they won't help verify stuff. I mean, I've been covering tech and one for another for almost 10 years. So I know those companies well, and they only, when the police go to them or the intelligence services go to them and they have legal orders, they have to turn over stuff. So don't ever imagine that your things on your phone or on your computer are completely private. But they don't, they don't help reporters analyze things, or private citizens analyze things. This was a kind of technology that just is sort of embedded in the way email works. And so, it was not perfect. For example, let's say that I had sent you 10,000 emails and you had sent me 10,000 emails. Only the 10,000 emails I sent to you could possibly be verified in this way. When you send it, you don't get one of these cryptographic signatures. So there's all sorts of it's a very imperfect way of validating the contents of an email, which is why, there were more than 100,000 we weren't able to. There's also just the reality that, Google is especially secure, and that their technology is good. And in this case, it made it easier to work this out. But if it went from some sort of third-rate email service, we probably, they probably don't do cryptographic signatures. They'd probably be harder to verify. So we were working with the cryptographic signatures that were produced by companies that do this kind of technology and do it well.
Did he have multiple email accounts, or was it always Gmail?
He had multiple email accounts. And I think overwhelmingly the ones we were able to verify were Gmail. But I believe there's also some Burisma emails we were able to verify too.
I have a journalism question here for you, Craig. Mike asked you a little bit ago about other stuff on the laptop that may be interesting, or maybe he even used the word amazing, and just kind of watching you answer that made me think about this. Have you, in your career, been on a story where you have to watch what you say and think so carefully through about your answers, as you're doing right now, which you should be doing, by the way? I'm just curious, where you say one word or one sentence, all of a sudden that it's out there being used in a certain political way, right?
I mean, this one is tough, but yes, this happens once in a while where there's just something that's so politically explosive that it gets watched super carefully. This is definitely in the top 10, I can say, but I've done other stuff over the years that also has been watched very carefully. And so, you have to, it's tough because Mike and I are old friends. And so there's things I would say to him at a bar that that I can't say as someone who's representing the Washington Post on a podcast that could be clipped and turned into a tweet, right? So there's just the reality that when you're at a big institution that takes its credibility as seriously as the Post does, you have to be careful, not to go beyond what we would say in a news story, if that makes sense. Like, our standards for accuracy and authenticity and objectivity are very rigorous, and it doesn't matter whether we're writing it or saying it, even if we're wherever, CNBC, NPR, you name it. When we're representing the Post, we have to be representing the Post, and we have to live up to its standards. And that means being careful sometimes.
Now, I remember when it broke and NBC came out and said, hey, we weren't allowed to look at it. You mentioned that you guys could not get a copy of it to look at it when the story first came out. It was basically the New York Post and the Daily Mail were the two that would publish a lot of the stuff. And ML, you alluded to some other frauds or things that have been perpetrated against the Post. Was there something else in this world of Giuliani and the Ukraine that the Post was being I don't know, like a fraud kind of being perpetrated? Was there anything else like that? I mean, what would give you guys pause to think that, oh yeah, this might not be real?
I mean, I think I covered a little bit of that a minute ago, but I also say that, I spent, feels like almost 5 years just working on disinformation and misinformation. From the summer of 2016 during the election until, I don't know, about a year ago, most of what I did was covering misinformation, disinformation. And a lot of that was, state sponsored. It was Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians in some cases. And a lot of it was just various folks on the internet learning how to manipulate how we view things. So, I mean, I personally, but also the Post institutionally, is just very aware of the way that stuff gets massaged and manipulated before you ever see it. And so, and it puts us in an awkward spot, right? If someone else has a news story, even when it's from a credible source, like if New York Times, which is the most credible newspaper in the world in some ways, if they report something, we don't just re-report it generally. Like we actually try to verify it on our own with our own sources. And so that standard of trying to check everything and be rigorous is deeply imbued in the place, and the internet era and the social media era in particular has really challenged that. When I joined the Post in the late 90s, we didn't have a full-time fact checker. Now we have a whole team of full-time fact checkers. All they do, and I don't mean fact checkers who are checking our stories. I mean, we have a team of people. All they do is they watch things that are said typically by public figures, and they tell you whether it's true or false and how they know it's true or false. Like, that really tells you how much the basic reliability of information has been undermined by the kind of era we live in. And so we try to stand in the middle and try to get it right all the time. And it's hard. And we're frankly suspicious of everybody. I mean, the way I describe it is I see our role as sort of like scrutinizing power. Now, some of that is government power. Sometimes it's Republican or Democratic power. A lot of times it's corporate power. Most of what I do is try to hold Google, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, to account when they do things that hurt our privacy or lead to violence or all that stuff. I did a lot of reporting about the social media that was used to organize the January 6th attacks. I mean, we are always trying to, guard the truth and get to the truth in a world where the truth seems like it's under assault all the time. So when something does arrive on a portable hard drive, that's full of stuff that, is at a minimum interesting. It as Mike said, you really have to treat it carefully.
It's like walking on a tightrope in a windstorm with someone turning a fan on and then greasing the wire underneath your feet. It's very, very dangerous.
Well, Craig, it doesn't help too when you hear things like
"You are fake news."
Yeah,
repeatedly.
Well,
right.
So here's the thing where everybody gets so mad. It's like, oh, they rushed to publish stuff right away. It's like, well, we didn't this time. Now we're being criticized for that. Craig?
It just depends. It depends on whether it comes from a credible source. Like if it's somebody who I deal with every day, who I know and who I've been, who tells me something, and in the past what they've said has stood up to scrutiny. Like, yeah, we publish that stuff pretty fast often. But when you get something that has been, handled by a bunch of people over a long period of time and is inherently politically explosive, yeah, we're very careful. And we were very careful in this case.
Sure, and everybody's familiar with the telephone game. Well, imagine what that's like with data. So, Craig, we want to be mindful of your time. We appreciate you joining us. Just for those folks who just cannot get this out of their head unless they hear it addressed in a clear, unambiguous, monosyllabic way, did the Washington Post sit on this stuff in 2020 to help Joe Biden win the election? And you really didn't want to take a look at this, but you were forced to take a look at this because the weight of the truth was crushing to the evil Washington Post. Yes or no?
No.
Okay, I kind of thought
we don't root for teams. Our job is to hold people to account, and we just didn't have the data for the relevant time period. And once we had it, we started working through it. It just took a while.
Yep. So they asked for it right away. They couldn't get it. They finally got it. In fact, not from the source they asked for, from somebody else, and then they went to work to try and verify it. So, folks, that's where this story came from. This is how it was done. Craig, we really appreciate your time. And I'll just tell you, if I think what you guys are working on is anything like the trove of text messages we got with the mayor, we found lots of leads that we kept working on after we broke the big story. And when those stories came out, they were pretty damn interesting. So you may want to keep an eye on the Washington Post, and I might dare suggest that you subscribe. It's pretty cheap if you're an Amazon Prime member, and it's worth every penny of it. So Craig Timberg, Washington Post, thanks for joining us this morning.
It's been great to see you. Good talking with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
My pleasure.
It is quite the story.
Yeah, and Craig only talked about the technical aspect. I mean, think about how complicated that was and how much time they spent on that. And that's just to verify what they found.
You know what I can't get over? I can't get over the fact, why wouldn't they, if they had this data back in 2020 and they gave it to the Post, they being Giuliani or whomever, why not just give it to everybody? Let them all start verifying it now if the end goal was to win the election.
So it's
what am I missing there? Why wouldn't they do that?
It's what lawyers call venue shopping, where you have a lawsuit or you have a criminal case and you hope you get a certain judge or a certain jurisdiction because you know that judge is tough on crime, or that judge is friendly to defendants, or it's a jurisdiction where they've made a lot of large financial awards. Like Wayne County for forever has been considered very plaintiff friendly. So if you sue a big business or government in Wayne County, the expectation is a jury is going to give you a large financial award. So if you have a choice to sue somebody in Oakland County, Macomb County, Westchester County, New York, or Wayne County, you file that lawsuit in Wayne County because you think you're going to get a better outcome. In the same way, if you have some hot information and it's just smoking, it's burning right through the bag, but somebody might say, boy, we really got to kick the tires on this. We got to kick it really hard, and that's going to take some time. Are you going to give it to the Washington Post with like, wow, we got to be real careful with this? Or are you going to give it to a publication that kind of is on the same page with you, where they're just looking for a big screaming headline, and nobody does big screaming headlines better than the New York Post? I mean,
but why not? Why not do that, and then a week later give it to the Times and the Washington Post and NBC and.
So my speculative answer is then you can beat the shit out of the Washington Post for not publishing it. It's look at the Washington Post is publishing all these stories that we don't like that hurt our candidate.
Yeah.
We can now claim they're in the bag because they didn't publish this one. And so you use your own actions to justify your own worldview that isn't necessarily justified by
now they're,
news sources.
Now they're taking their victory laps, and they should. They were right, but they were right because they didn't have the information.
Well, for people like me, I'm not willing to believe until I see it verified by a trusted source. So you could argue they got their first hit right before the election, and now they can take another lap after someone who I think is a little more rigorous has agreed with them. In fact, I'm trying to think about, and I don't remember everything that the New York Post published.
What have they agreed with? Let's
but I don't know what's new. I mean, I think as
what have
Craig,
they agreed with?
But think about this, and this is the important point. The New York Post clearly did not spend as much time or as much effort to verify this as the Washington Post did. And even after the Washington Post did that, they didn't add too many more bricks on the pile than the New York Post. So I'm kind of left wondering whether how much of this other information really is explosive, because the New York Post probably would have gone with it really early on, or InfoWars or American News Network.
It hasn't been out there.
Yeah,
no,
so maybe this is the biggest, worst thing.
To me, there are a couple things. First of all, it's just the symbolism. There's a laptop out there. It must have information on it, right? Mm-hmm. The assumption is that there's dirty, corrupt. There's information that suggests there's corruption that links Hunter Biden to Joe.
Sure.
And so that's one thing. The other thing is,
that's the kind of stuff I'd be weary of. But the fact, it was his laptop.
Right. The other thing is, I think it's worked against the folks that want to use this to take down Biden, and just the Democrats in general, is that
it's pretty.
It just come off 4 years.
Hunter is a pretty bad dude.
Of No, but it just come off 4 years of kids making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars because they're close to their proximity to their father in power, right? So I think this would have played differently 10 years ago, 12 years ago, but the public just got used to the fact that, and justified it. Half the country, whoever voted for Trump, justified, well, okay, maybe they're not qualified and they're making all this money off of his name, but those are just the perks of power. You used to hear that phrase. We heard that phrase from 2016 to 2020, the perks of power. Well, of course they should be able to make money. So to me, it had been diminished to some degree.
I think the only
right, because nothing's been illegal so far. It's just
well, so this, yeah, and then frankly, this email where Joe Biden and Hunter Biden met with somebody from Burisma, Joe Biden wasn't vice president, and I don't know what the content of the meeting. So even this sort of new nugget is just a lead that needs to be followed, a lead that may go nowhere, or it may, like I said, be a fissure that opens up.
They made money off the name, right? From 2016 to 2020, they made money. It's unseemly, but so far nothing has been illegal.
I'll tell you,
well,
the only
if he didn't report it, and I mean taxes, that's what's going to end up getting him in the end is
right. But Hunter, right?
Yeah,
yeah. The only presidential kin I can think of. Maybe there's two of them who haven't tried to cash in on their relative's position were Amy and Miss Lillian Carter. Now, of course, Billy Carter was a shitbag, but
you don't count young kids when they're in. I mean, the Obama.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Trump's kid Barron is going to cash in later. I don't know, but
the Obamas have not so far.
I guess that's true.
She did get a pretty cushy writing gig in Hollywood. I don't know, Malia.
Oh, did she?
Well,
she's writing for with Donald Glover for Atlanta.
And she got into U of M, which is the Harvard of the West.
It's the other one, but yeah.
Oh, well, one of them did.
That's probably talking about Sasha.
Yeah.
Even Clinton's cat wrote a book.
Well,
and they killed that dog to keep it quiet.
And Chelsea Clinton certainly has cashed in on her parents, 100%.
But I mean,
she's done a lot of jobs and sits on boards that I don't think she's really qualified to sit on. But
I don't mean cashed in that way. I mean cashed in where you're going out into the geopolitical situation, like Biden's in Ukraine. He's not making money with Hollywood producers, and people see that. Oh, now China's involved.
This is way worse, and
so it's different, right?
Well, and he doesn't seem to have the best character, the best content of character. I mean, he's a drug addict. He openly admits that.
So if you read these Washington Post stories, and Craig has a lengthy story explaining how they went through, but if you read the main bar, the main story, you'll see that Hunter Biden was getting a lot of money from a Chinese outfit that really didn't do much. And you'll see that Biden's brother was cashing in, which some of that came out before the election. I mean, there's some interesting things here that raise some questions. And Obama's kid's probably too young to parlay this into anything. We'll see where they go. But Amy Carter is now old enough that I think we can say safely that she did not use her connections to a president to build a career.
And that speaks to that speaks to Jimmy Carter. Right?
Well, I mean, but parents can have crappy kids, but I mean, my mom would tell you that. But I mean, some of my siblings are really. I mean, I'm an angel, but I don't know about those guys. That one guy, yeah. But anyway, but I mean, Amy Carter's got to be what 60, 70.
I understand parents can have crappy kids, but you're talking about a man that gave up his not disavowed. What did he do with his peanut farm? Right when he got into office, he got rid of anything at all that could have been a conflict of interest in any part of his job. I mean, that's just. I think he's the only president who's. I don't know that Obama had those kind of interests maybe when he got into office, but who else has ever done that? Right or left, right?
Yeah.
He was just different.
Yeah. Well, yeah. He was an extraordinary ex-president, but probably not as and a better president than people give him credit for. But he had solar panels on the roof of the White House, for Pete's sake. But that's neither here nor there. Mark, just to touch real quickly back on your point about why would they give it to the Post in New York, and
he also had people working against him. Sorry, but he did
in Washington
delay the release of the hostages. But that's another.
Story.
No, he's a victim of a lot of circumstance. But looking back, like ML just said, he was a lot better than I think people judged him at the time.
Yeah, he had inflation, he had the hostage crisis, he had the energy crisis. I mean, there's a lot, and I think he would probably acknowledge too that he was unschooled in the ways of dealing with Congress, and I think some of the books that have come out have said, his own personal demeanor and mannerisms hurt him too, where he was a little bit holier than thou.
Yeah, a little bit too much of a choir boy, right?
Yeah, or just sort of we're not going to do. I mean, I'll just tell you, as an unsuccessful candidate, there were things people suggested to me where I said, we're not going to do that, and it may be one of the reasons we lost. But I mean, when you go into a position like that and you're not willing to
play the game,
perform in certain ways, it's gonna limit your effectiveness.
What were we going to say about giving it to the New York Post instead?
Yeah, so just another local example. There were sources who had stories who would bring them to me, and they would bring them to a certain television reporter, and And I would say, okay, I need some time to verify this. I trust everything you've given me. It all looks legit. I just need to get my own copies or make my own calls. And they would say, no problem. And I said, so I'm not going to publish this tomorrow. I need some time to do my due diligence. They'd say, no problem. And I'd say, now, did you give it to anybody else? Because I know last time we had this conversation, you gave it to somebody and they put it on TV at 6 o'clock. And at this time, where I worked was right across the street from the television station. And they said, no. And I said, you're sure? I'm like, okay. Because I'm working on other stuff. If I put that aside to try and verify this, and I see it on the 10 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news, I'm going to be really pissed off. He'd say, yep. And I'd say, you're sure? He's like, okay, I did give it to this person. I'd say, what the heck? You're wasting my... Because at 6 o'clock, this shit was reported. It was read as if it was from a hymnal. And most of the time it was accurate. Most of the time it was solid. But this particular source knew if he gave it to reporter A at TV station WWE or whatever it was, I don't know,
the one downtown.
Random letters. It would be on the air that day without any real independent verification. But if you knew if I had it, I was going to fly spec it, and I wouldn't publish it until I was sure that everything that had been shared with me was legit. And oftentimes I would find more, and it would be a big story, and all the TV stations would chase it anyway. But sources do this all the time. They try and go for the outlet that is going to give their story the run that they want, the way they want it. And I think that's probably why Rudy Giuliani did not return the Washington Post's calls. And if you go back and listen to what Craig said, it was in fact another conservative activist that gave it to the Washington Post. So they're still waiting for Rudy Giuliani to return their calls. And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody scrutinized the public record if at some point Rudy Giuliani didn't say, where's the Washington Post on this story?
And look what they got, Mark. What did they get? I mean, you heard Craig. Not much new. They verified that it was actually the information, but other than that, the information itself, it wasn't much new. So how's that going to help them?
When that story broke, though, NBC was one primarily. I remember that they're like, we want to see this. We want to see these drives. We want to look at it. And the Post did too. So why not give it to them then? Because was it really?
Because they might undermine it.
Was it really to help the election for Trump, or was it really to fuck over the media?
Well, maybe it's both, but think about it from their perspective too. If they get the information and frame it kind of like just the Post just did, and what Craig was talking about, that sort of says it's not that big a deal, right? So
but it's sort of a big deal. I mean,
it's not that big a deal. It really isn't, unless their law's broken. You're talking about taxes. I mean, after what we just went through with taxes for the last 5 years with Trump, I mean, that's the thing about Trump is that he's made a lot of this stuff that's not that big a deal. His family made hundreds of millions of dollars in links with Saudi Arabia. There were Russians involved. There's all this other sort of stuff. I'm not trying to say
those are all fair points. I'm just trying to keep the two things separate. I would think if you gave it, and when the story blew up and it was like the New York Post has it and the Daily Mail has it, it would help verify the stories if you did give it to a Washington Post and a New York Times.
But what if the Post comes out and says, yeah, okay, fine, this is his information, but what he did wasn't legal. They made money. Yeah, maybe there were little clues. So that
people are going to draw those conclusions anyway.
But it's almost better if it's a mystery a little bit, or you have somebody like the Post just put the headline out there without, and then you can just assume the worst. So, but if a credible news source pokes deflates that. I don't know.
The Washington Post also had an editorial about this, and in the editorial, they do point out that they were given doctored recordings of Biden pressuring someone in Ukraine that was given to them by Giuliani, which wasn't true. So I guess maybe that's why they were
and I guess that's the point I'm trying to make is that you run the risk of, okay, this is all a big scam. Whereas the Post just had a headline out there saying, oh my God, and what is on that laptop?
And the entity that looks the worst in this is probably Twitter for pulling it all down, and Facebook for changing their algorithms on a story that ended up being true.
Well, but back up.
They're not back up
to what you just said. Let's just walk through that sentence and
I'm not a very good
break it down. No, but you're a clever fellow. You also went to the University of Michigan, or a university in Michigan that's in Ann Arbor. But let's break that down. They pulled it because a story was posted that turned out to be true. That's the thing. When you throw a bunch of shit out there and then later on say, well, we checked it, it turns out it was true.
I understand that.
Responsible organizations don't fly bullshit and then later on say, whew, I guess we got it right.
I'm one of those weirdos that will actually defend Twitter because they're a private company and they can pull down what they want. But it's really weird that they pull a story that's being shared by the Post, the New York Post, when there's a lot of other garbage and lies on there at that time.
Well, now here's where I'm with you. Twitter lets so much bullshit fly.
That's what I mean.
That
yeah.
Why did this one get caught in their filter? Okay, so that's where Twitter, deserves to
They
burn
look the worst in this because they were never going to try to verify the story.
Yeah, and if you find the New York Post to pass muster on most of its other stuff, then you probably should let this one go. Now, let's back up to the New York Post for a minute, too. Maybe they deserve credit for being more responsible because if they had another 100,000 emails that couldn't be verified, the salacious pics file and some other stuff, and they didn't publish any of it, either it wasn't really that salacious or they couldn't verify it either. And they said, well, the furthest we can go is with what we went with, which the Washington Post, in some regards, has said, yeah, you got it right.
Yeah. To me, the most interesting thing of all of this is Craig's point about how hard it is to do the job now because there's so much misinformation that they've had to hire teams of people to figure out what's real and what's not.
Well, it's also the fact that the news cycle is so fast and continuous.
Right, but
everybody wants answers now.
But there's just so much misinformation, and not just from political parties in this country, but state actors all over the world, and everybody trying to push their own. Yeah, it's just, and how do you sifting through that? It's scary, isn't it?
What a nightmare.
Well, yeah, it is. And so when we did the text messages, that was 15 years ago.
Different world.
But one of the things that we were cognizant of then is we tried to verify the text messages by looking what was on the mayor's public schedule.
Right.
That really only went to the media. So you'd say, well, he said he was in L.A. at a Lakers game. What does his calendar say? Oh, it says he's in L.A. So that, to our mind, it's like, okay, so that verifies it. But then we also thought, this is a public schedule. If somebody else got this, they could create a fake text message based on that. So we had to go 2 layers deep and get other records that we knew only the Free Press had to verify it. Because even in 2007 or 8, my mind is foggy on this, we were concerned about getting spoofed.
I'm surprised your mind's foggy about anything with that story.
And 15 years, well, because we reported so much stuff on Kilpatrick that people come up to me and tell me stories. I'm like, oh my God, I never knew that. I said, you wrote that. And I said, oh shit, I better do a quick search. Oh, I did write that. That was a good story. But
so what other ways did you verify besides the public schedule? Like what did the Free Press have that the public wouldn't have had?
So we had the mayor's credit card records, which we obtained through a lawsuit that only we would have gotten that material because we were the only parties to the lawsuit. We also had a copy of his unedited credit card records that we obtained from a source. So we had 2 ways to verify it then. And we also had the mayor's private calendar, his appointment book, that we got through a lawsuit. And only we would have had that. So even if you were out there and you FOIA'd all the mayor's public schedules or you worked at a TV station assignment desk and you shared them with someone, you wouldn't have had those other 2 troves of documents, really 3 troves of documents, because we were the only ones who got them, because we got them years earlier from lawsuits and stories we had done. So we felt that we had some information that was only available to the Free Press that we could use as additional layers to verify that these records, which we always believed to be accurate, were in fact the real McCoy. And there was no presidential election hanging in the balance. That's how careful we were 15 years ago. Imagine what you'd have to do now when people have become so sophisticated, when the stakes are so high, and when you have, as Craig said, foreign governments that are highly skilled at doing this, trying to lead you down a dark alley where when you get to the end of it, you will be clubbed to death. So,
wow.
And I don't really feel guilty mentioning Kilpatrick stuff. I'm sure people will be like, because Kilpatrick was in the news this week. This dude won't leave Detroit.
It's preaching, right?
Your point about Twitter, though, is an interesting one, because there's a daily barrage of stuff that's like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the congresswoman from Florida, Georgia. Sorry, Georgia.
Too many people pay too much attention to her.
No, but she tweeted out last night, maybe, that Senators Murkowski, Collins, and Romney, who are going to support
Jackson,
that they are supporting pedophilia, that they are in favor of. She maybe even tweeted they are in favor of pedophilia. So obviously that's not true, but and I'm just look. I know
whether it's true or not, we haven't seen the evidence.
Both sides, exactly. Both sides do this to some degree, but it's just that kind of tweet is
sure.
There are millions of tweets like that every day from all sorts of people, right? It's just not true. That's what you have to sift through.
Well, that's why it's
Twitter.
That's why it's even more strange that they would block a story from the New York Post for people just simply sharing it.
Well,
and then they come out looking worse for it. But you know what? People still use the platform.
But how do you police all the other stuff that's just demonstrable? You can't. You just can't.
Well, I mean, you have to. You have to try it some way. You know,
Yeah.
You're not allowed to. There's certain things you can't put out there. I'm sure. Can't put death threats on there.
Or
I don't know. Can you?
Nudity. You don't see nudity.
Well,
you can on Twitter.
My family was threatened on Twitter.
yeah.
When I contacted Twitter, they said, "No, it's within our within our acceptable standards." I said, "Well, that says more about you than it does about anybody else."
It's just,
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's depressing.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
So if you're wondering who to trust, might I suggest Mr. Luke Nowacki?
Oh, yeah. Trust with your money.
Segue.
Yeah, Luke, Pinnacle Wealth, 248-663-4748 for rational financial advice. Stocks, bonds, how do you allocate that 401k or your SEP, IRA, or all those fun letters and numbers. Luke knows it all. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do 6 months from now, 6 years from now? Give him a call. Get advice. Get a strategy. Call Luke Nowacki at Pinnacle Wealth, 248-663-4748.
Securities and investment advisory.
I forgot to set you up. I'm sorry. Because I know you love saying this.
When you call Luke, he'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Now you sound dejected about it.
Because when you call Luke, he'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc. Member FINRA SIPC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
We're looking at money.
So when I had a different geek of the week, but I'm walking a different one on because all this stuff about people who lie and make stuff up and all this other crap. Well, it turns out a lot of them
don't think they're lying, by the way.
Well, but there's some of them okay, so there's another issue, but their tenuous grasp on reality is a frightening problem. But there's a woman who made headlines and was very compelling in informing Michigan that our votes were stolen, that our elections were corruption. You may remember she's very fetching. Her name is Melissa Carone. And she wants to be a lawmaker now. She wants to take a seat where she can sit and face people like her who may yell bullshit at them and then tell them that they don't know what they're talking about. But here's a little problem.
If I'm wrong, I can go to prison.
Yeah, and actually that's true because she filled out an affidavit to get on the ballot in Macomb County to run for a seat in the State House. And Beth LeBlanc and Craig Mauger, two outstanding reporters at the Detroit News, have been keeping an eye on her. She filled out a faulty affidavit attesting that she had no outstanding campaign finance issues. Now, I've filled one of these out, too.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
And what it tells you is if you sign this affidavit to qualify to be on the ballot, you have to swear that you have no outstanding. In other words, you don't owe the state any money because you didn't follow the rules on some other stuff. And signing that falsely subjects you to a potential felony perjury charge. Now, I've caught many, many people filing these false affidavits, and no law enforcement have ever done anything about it, sadly. But Melissa Carone, who questioned our system, who challenged our accuracy, our veracity, our trustability, if you will. You are a Geek of the Week for doing exactly the kind of stuff that you say everybody else is doing.
Projection.
Does that make her something?
It's all about her sweet. No. Oh, yeah. I already said you are a Geek of the Week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
120%.
Thanks for listening.
I'm still sick.
See you again. There's an all-night party in room 7609.
Room 7609 is brought to you by the Caju Cafe, where there's always something great going on. Either the great food, feather bowling, they got a pinball machine now, and live music is one of the things that the Caju Cafe is known for like nothing else on the east side. Every Monday is Open Blues Jam and Muscle Madness. Tuesdays is Funk Night, and Wednesday is karaoke. This Wednesday, however, Brian Charette Organ Trio will be playing. Friday, the Chris Kruzawa Group plays the music of Frank Zappa. Saturday, it's Ernie Clark and the Magnificent Bastards, and then the Whiskey Charmers. Sunday, it's Brad Billmeyer and then the Delta 5. To find out more about what's going on at the Caju Cafe, because there's always something going on at the Caju Cafe, go to cajucafe.com. We'll have a link to that website and all our sponsors' websites on our website, which is mlsoulofdetroit.com.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I really thought the song was great. So how do we donate?
What, are you in a hurry?
He's fast forwarding. He's got to go check out that Hunter Biden. He got Hunter Biden's cell phone.
Oh, there's another song. Oh, we're playing two today. That's nice.
This is our first one. So you just heard the bad podcast. Well, here's the bad lieutenant.
What you doing?